Hey friends, I'd like to tell you the second of 3 stories that I typically tell to be able to help churches begin to think about not only how to survive in the 21st century, but also how to thrive. Now these stories evolve out of just some of my own experience in coaching churches and talking to churches, and also some of my own research in terms of the things that are beginning to affect us in local churches, whether you attend one, whether you're on staff at one, or whether you help to lead one, or maybe some combination of all of those things. And if you've listened to my other story, Dinosaur to Wolfpack, you probably have an idea of where we're probably going with some of these things. But this particular story, which I call The Sinking Ship, is really designed to help churches think through certain pragmatics that are going to be necessary as we talk together about what some of those changes will entail. So, I'm going to tell you the story first, and then we'll talk about some of the issues that kind of come along the backside. So here we go. Let's pretend for a moment that you are the captain of a Carnival cruise liner. Big, huge thing. And there are 4,500 souls on board, plus the crew and all of the support personnel. I mean, we've got lounge singers, we've got dancers, we've got shuffleboard operators, we've got, all of the people. So there's 4,500 souls, the people that are on board. And then there's the other crew that are necessary to kind of keep everything going, right? And you are the captain. And I'm your first mate. And everything is going great. We leave from Miami, we get out to sea, we get about a week out to sea, and then a meteor strikes the northern polar ice cap, melts it in a moment, and before we know what's happening, the entire world is flooded, and there's no land left. Yes, I know, Genesis 6 would tell you that that's not going to happen again, but just stay with me for a minute. Where we find ourselves is after a couple of weeks of trying on the radio, after a couple of weeks of trying to gain our bearings, we basically come up with the idea that as far as human life on planet Earth, this is it. There's no land, there's no other people, there's no other survivors that we can tell. It's just you, me, the crew, the support staff, and 4,500 souls that are on the cruise liner. Okay, now let's pretend that after a couple of months, I come to you one day and I say, Cap, we got a problem. I need to talk to you over here so that we don't let this get out too far. So you kind of step over with me and I kind of say, listen, I was down with the second mate into the bilge, and we noticed that when the meteor happened, a couple of things happened, and we actually have a tear in the hull, and we are taking on water. Now here's the thing, it's not tons right now, but we're taking on enough water that the bilge pumps will not be able to keep pace. And based on our calculations, we think we've maybe got 3 years before this whole cruise liner is under the water. So you think, and you go like, well, can we fix the tear? And what I say is we can't, we don't have the equipment, we don't have the tools. We would literally need a dry dock, and as nearly as we can tell, there isn't one. Like we would actually have to haul the whole vessel up out of the water and be able to work on it in order to repair the hull. We don't have the tools, the equipment, we don't have any way, like that. The only thing we can't do is repair the tear, okay? So now what? And I leave it like that. I say, what would you do? And you wanna know what's really interesting? There's usually a significant difference between the way that some people approach that question and others. And here's what I mean. I love talking to entrepreneurs about this. I'm amazed at the answers that I get when I do the sinking ship metaphor with entrepreneurs. They immediately shift into ideation mode. They immediately start thinking, well, you could do this, you could do that, you could build a barge, you could turn the Carnival cruise liner into you could build a flotilla of smaller ships. They got all these different ideas of ways that you could actually have everything survive. But do you know what's interesting? The vast majority of the time, when I do this metaphor with pastors, most pastors think for a minute, and then they look at me and go, well, you just got to fix the leak. Like, that's all there is to it. You just have to find some way to fix the leak, Jack. And when I say, no, that's the only thing you can't do. You cannot fix the leak. You've got 3 years until this whole thing is under the water. What do? What I find is that most pastors have difficulty envisioning beyond the thing that they are currently operating within. So my favorite scary response is about 10 years ago, maybe 12, I was actually coaching a church and I used this metaphor with the lead pastor because he was trying to figure out how to help make some shifts toward being more missional in his congregation. And I told him the sinking ship metaphor and he kind of thought for a second. And then he kind of smiled at me and he said, I see where you're going with this, Jack. You know what I'd probably say? You can get a lot of living done in 3 years. I was like, are you serious? He was like, yeah, dude, the truth is that if I went to my people and I did that kind of a thing, most of them would say, listen, we're old enough, we're tired enough, and we don't really want to have to build some sort of water world post-apocalyptic version of everything. So as long as you, Captain, are the last person to go down with the ship, I'd literally rather play shuffleboard for the next 2.5 years. I'll probably be gone after that anyway, and then you can go do whatever you want. And I was like, wow. Bro, I am so glad that I'm not at your church. And he literally was like, I know that's not really what I would want either. I just don't think that the people that I lead would actually be excited about figuring out this whole thing that you're talking about. So I was like, whoa. And there are some churches that I think would probably say the same. Listen, I get it, but here's the deal. You would probably require a level of change in order to survive beyond that scenario that my people just aren't willing to expend. And it would probably make them miserable and kill them in the process. But if that's not you, if that's not your church, if you're really willing to say, look, I get it, the changes are going to be necessary. I don't even know what they are, but just help me with the right questions to ask, Jack. Then I can help you a little bit. First question that I usually ask is, do you need another Carnival cruise liner in a scenario like that? And the answer is, of course not. What you build next isn't going to look anything like the thing you are currently on. A Carnival cruise liner is built for entertainment and pleasure. But in a survival scenario, you don't need 15 shuffleboard decks. You don't need an onboard pool. You don't need 15 lounges. You don't need a casino. Like, the thing you build next is by nature going to look different than the thing you are on. And that has to be okay. If you try to build another Carnival cruise liner from the cruise liner you're on, you will probably not succeed and it will probably not work anyway. You don't need that. So what do you need? Could be a barge, it could be any number of other things, but all I can definitively tell you is a Carnival cruise liner in that scenario is probably not the thing that you need to try to build. Next, let me ask you this question. Does anyone get to sit around and play shuffleboard in a scenario like that? Does anyone just get to keep coming to the buffet, complaining about why the shrimp isn't fresh? Does anyone just get to watch movies in their stateroom? Does anyone get to just play while everybody else is at work? And the answer again is, of course not. Everyone is suddenly involved. If you were the captain, one of the things you'd have to do would be to gather everybody together and to say, okay, here is the situation that we are in. We need everyone's help in order to survive. I don't know why you got on the cruise liner, but here's what I will tell you now. We need everyone's help. You got on because it's your 50th wedding anniversary and you're a union carpenter. And your wife is a school teacher? Great. Here's the thing. I'm going to pair you up over here. I'm going to pair her up over here. We need you to be able to do all kinds of carpentry things. We need her to do all these kinds of things. What about you? You're an engineer? Great. We need some of those. You're a what? You're a theologian. Cool. We don't need one of those. We're going to have to put you over here learning how to do things alongside the carpenter, right? Like I don't care why you got on the boat. But now that you're here, you get a job. Everyone gets a job. Everyone is involved. It's not just the dedicated task of the staff or the dedicated staff of the support crew. If you're on that ship, you are now invested in the survival of everyone else on the ship. Next question is this. Can you tear down the thing you're on faster than the thing you're building? The answer, of course, is of course not. You have to stay alive and afloat long enough to build the new thing. You don't just get to go to the people and say, hey, we're all going to jump overboard and then we're all going to just sort of freehand build this barge. Like, you can't. You'll all get eaten by sharks. So what you need to do is figure out, how do you tear down the thing that you are on, that you are depending on, at a rate of speed that is not too fast so that you sink the thing you're on before the new thing is built. But you still have to take down the thing you're on in order to build the thing you need. It has to be this sort of an equal exchange, right? You can't build too fast. You can't tear down too fast. You have to do it in kind of this way where you build the new thing and take down the old in a way where they don't outpace each other. All right. So those are some of the questions that I like to ask. Let me tell you about my favorite response. My favorite response came from someone who said, well, here's what I would do. I need to build a flotilla of smaller ships with specific functions that you could set to sea using the cruise liner as this sort of launching point. So what we would do is we would tear down these kinds of things, build new ships. We'd take 30 to 50 people from the cruise liner, put them on the ship, set it out to sea, and the hope would be that in the process of setting out these smaller ships, we would eventually turn the cruise liner into a dry dock to be able to service those smaller ships if they ever had problems, to repair them if they had a leak or something. Like, we'd want to learn our lesson from the cruise ship, right? Obviously, having a dry dock is a good thing. So we would say, we're going to tear down the cruise liner, build smaller ships, and then keep whatever remains of the cruise liner as a dry dock to be able to service and repair the smaller ships when they need help. I like that vision. It's survivable. So I've played with it a bit for our situation in local churches in the 21st century, because if you've heard my other story on Dinosaur to Wolfpack, you know that I already believe that the spiritual temperature is dropping, the meteor has already hit the polar ice caps, and the world is already flooding. So here's what it looks like for us as leaders and crew of cruise liners in that situation. First, you do the same thing. You build smaller, interdependent churches that are roped and looped together, that are capable of setting sail on their own and surviving on their own, but who choose to be linked together into networks where they can share resources and knowledge for mutual benefit. You might have this young adult vessel, or a Birch Row Drive vessel, or a Hazlitt High School family vessel, whatever. But there are people who are on that vessel that have a vested interest in its survival and its health. And they are specialized around specific nexus points and common values that keep them working in that direction. Second, everyone plays to make the shift. I don't care why you thought you were coming to church. We're giving you a job. I don't care how old you are, how young you are, or whether or not you have any prior experience. And if you refuse to do anything, you're going to figure out really fast that this just isn't the place for you. And we're okay with that. Third and finally, you still need a dry dock. You need a place to come when you spring a leak, when you run into rough waters, or when you need help with something specific. For me, that's still something that looks kind of like what we experience in a conventional church, but the focus is only on three things, and these three things only. First, content. Second, communication and connection. And third, coaching. Now, content. Content is things like training, classes, information, manuals, curriculum, and tools. To stick with the metaphor, the dry dock is the place where all of the tools are. If you need to borrow a hammer or a socket wrench, you can come to the dry dock. You can borrow that. The thing that we would say would be, if Trinity Church Actual, this thing that we stand in, is the equivalent of that, then if it's the dry dock, then you should expect that we will be generating some kind of content to instruct people who need it on things that they don't know and that can be utilized and adapted for a variety of situations. You need a Bible study curriculum on the book of Job. Boom, we got that. You need a podcast on practical parenting. Boom, we got that. Like, we are generating content so that you don't have to generate it yourself. If you're in one of these smaller vessels and you need equipping for how to reach your neighborhood, we've got a 4-part mini-series, 2 books to recommend, and a coaching session for you to be able to jump in so that you see how it works. We're not abandoning you to have to go and figure everything out on your own. The dry dock is generating content. Second thing is, the dry dock is responsible for connection and communication. It's the relay point for people who have resources with those who do not, or who can join new people to other vessels in the flotilla when they need to do so. If, for example, a vessel finds a family adrift out on the waves, the dry dock can figure out how best to connect them to the vessel where they would be the best fit. It can also serve as a central relay when something affects all the vessels. It can serve as a point of meeting and an engagement when necessary. And finally, the dry dock is responsible for coaching. It specializes in being able to troubleshoot, recommend, and advise action when necessary or helpful to those who operate in a given vessel. Let's say, for example, that one of the vessels is a young adult boat. All the people are college age, they're all single, they're all following Jesus together, and it's a great time. But here's the thing. Let's say that they start getting married. Well, now things change. Now they're not single anymore. Now they are having fun, but they're having fun as couples, and they don't know how to do this whole marriage thing. Then let's say they start having kids. Boom, parenting is a whole different gig. So they can come back to the dry dock and we can say, oh yeah, I totally see. Well, you're going to need a bolt-on module here that'll help you with your marriage stuff. And then you're going to need a bolt-on module over here for parenting. We're going to connect you with a couple of other vessels that have older parents that will be able to coach you and help you out. And then if you run into some issues about conflict or some things like that, you can come back to the dry dock. We'll hoist you up. We'll figure out where the leak is occurring. We'll help you patch it up. And then we're going to send you back out to sail. So the dry dock is able to help diagnose, provide content, connection, and coaching, but it doesn't do the work. There are probably like 3 to 5 people who live and work on the dry dock. They have highly specialized functions designed to equip and repair individual vessels. They probably specialize in one of those 3 areas listed: content generation, communication and connection, or coaching, or the support of one of those 3 functions. They don't do the work of the vessels. The dry dock is also probably self-sustaining, or it only takes a portion of the resources of the vessels for self-sustainability. There are a variety of ways that this could happen, but the vessels don't keep the dry dock alive. The dry dock is part of the flotilla, but it doesn't run or lead or operate the flotilla. The captains of the various vessels, including the dry dock, operate as a council of elders to discern and decide what is best for the flotilla. Wouldn't it be interesting if each elder was a captain of a vessel, along with a crew from his vessel in leading and loving and shepherding the vessel? We actually saw this in Peru when one of the criteria for membership into the Council of Elders for a Peruvian church planting network was that you were presently and currently planting and leading a church yourself. That would certainly be something in our U.S. context, wouldn't it? If you were part of the team of elders because you had real-world experience leading one of these smaller vessels, then you would be bringing the issues that your vessel was experiencing into the context of the broader council to be able to seek, pray, and discern what was best for all of the ships together. Now, again, friends, this is just a metaphor designed to give a given church's creative juices sort of flowing. And like the dinosaur to wolf pack metaphor or Battlestar Galactica, it's just one more way of saying that what has been may have been great. It may have worked or not worked, and it may have been comfortable for us. But we can't go back. And to go forward, things are going to have to look different, and they're going to have to operate differently than they did before.